Since the day I started gigging with live bands, I have done a fairly decent job of keeping track of everything that goes on by way of video, cassette tapes even, and also these journals. I used to write in journals, hardback journals, and then of course I got a laptop computer and I would save everything to these floppy disks. Yes, I'm that old. But the thing that I focused on the most was video. Some of these tapes are high 8mm videotapes that were transferred to mini DV. But this was the only way I was able to preserve most of that video because a lot of that old video did not survive. But either way, it's not going to stop me from telling this story. I was going through this stuff and looking around, and I was thinking about something when I was talking to a member of our community here about the Judgment Night soundtrack. And it made me think back to those days when all of that was on the rise. And I would say that the Judgment Night soundtrack was probably the peak of it. This is something that I had spoken to a friend of mine about a few years back, and he found it to be very entertaining. So I figured I would share it all with you guys. Like a lot of people, my introduction to the marriage of rap rock came by way of Run DMC and Aerosmith doing Walk This Way. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that this planted a lot of seeds in the minds of a lot of rock and rap artists at the time. But it would be another 3 to 4 years before, well, of course, Anthrax really pushed it. When Anthrax did I'm the Man, and then they collaborated or basically got together with Public Enemy to do a cover of Bring the Noise, and I guess you could say it was more of a remake because Public Enemy was in on it. But when they redid Bring the Noise, I knew that it wouldn't be long before the floodgates would open and you would start to see this marriage of metal and hip hop or gangster rap, whatever you want to call it. My history with rap and hip hop and all that, it's not very deep. You know, there were some groups that I got into when I was young coming up. I was listening to such a wide variety of music, but I was listening to some rap here and there. I was really into Slick Rick and Run DMC and what was it, Houdini? I thought they were pretty cool. There are a few rap groups that I thought were pretty cool coming up. Some of the names are escaping me right now, but the main one that I really liked, that I really enjoyed, and I saw them live, and I want to say it was either 1995 or 96, was The Roots. And I'm telling you, I know what you guys are thinking right now because they're Jimmy Fallon's backing band, but I'm telling you, The Roots live in 1995, 96, I might have even seen them in 93. I saw them right as they released Do You Want More? Let me put it that way. My years are a little bit blurry, but they were amazing live. And I went on to see them maybe 2 more times, but there was a show here in Atlanta in the mid-90s, I want to say it was either 95 or 96, where they were the headlining act. It was at Variety Playhouse, and they absolutely destroyed the place. And the bassist of that band at the time, he did a bass solo that just was unreal. Everyone was just losing it over the bass solo. To move back into this whole marriage of metal and rap, there are a lot of different bands doing things. There was this band called Mordred, and they seemed like they were really gonna take off, but then they just disappeared after their release In This Life, and I think that came out in 1991, if I'm correct, 91 or 92. Pretty sure it was 91, early 91. But I could be wrong on that, and I'll put it up on the screen. But anyway, this band, Mordred, they were really the first band to do what Incubus would go on to do, and bands like even the Deftones, Deftones, not the. We say the a lot on these bands, like the Pixies. It's Pixies, Deftones, right? Not all bands are the bands, you know? The is a the band, right? Anyway, after Mordred kind of faded, you had this thing going on that was after the whole Bring the Noise thing, and then the whole grunge thing happened. And there were a lot of bands that just stuck to their guns and just hung with it. And one of those bands was Biohazard. I picked up the album Urban Discipline. It's the only Biohazard album that I have. I picked it up on CD. As a matter of fact, I think I could, if you give me a minute, I'll show it to you. I did not pick up the first Biohazard album, but I did pick this one up. Shortly after its release, I picked this album up. This album was constantly in my CD player when I got it. It's like coming apart now, like most jewel cases do. I really became a huge fan of this band because they were kind of like, Biohazard to me was like this band, this other New York City hardcore band called Sick of It All. They were like Sick of It All meets Public Enemy or something, or, you know, or just one of those hardcore, they were almost like Sick of It All meets NWA, really. Biohazard was heavy, they were hard, they were like total gangster rock, gangster metal. That's what they were. To me, those guys are like the godfathers of gangster metal, if that makes any sense, or gangster hardcore. How about that? Hardcore rap, hardcore, and metal. Like, it was all there. You were getting all of that. And these guys, this lineup, this original, somewhat original lineup, they had a drummer before, I don't know why I'm forgetting people's names right now, but anyway, this is their original 1988 lineup, okay? Let's leave it like that. Anyway, so Biohazard hits the scene. Shortly thereafter, we hear from Rage Against the Machine. We hear from 311. I need to insert this. Here in the Southeast, we had one band. They were very well known in the Southeast. Fred Durst even used to go to these guys' shows, and they were called Stuck Mojo. I used to hang around these guys a lot. I think I saw Stuck Mojo for the first time in 1990, if not 91. So they were ahead of the curve too, and they almost completely went unnoticed. And those guys, they mentored me a good bit. And like I said, I used to hang out with them, and through those guys, I would sit in on some of the studio sessions, and I met people like Devin Townsend, and they were really tight with the wrestling community. So through those guys, I met people like Diamond Dallas Page, and the list goes on. This whole like music and entertainment world, it is so small, and that band totally deserves to be mentioned. They should be included in here. Anywhere I can, I'm gonna put links to all the bands that I mentioned. I will slowly start to put them into the description below in the video, because you guys should check that stuff out if you're interested. You know, all these bands start coming out of the woodwork, and they start to marry hip hop with metal or rock. And then you, of course, you have the Judgment Night soundtrack, which you guys saw in one of my videos as I was flipping through the CDs. But anyway, moving on. So fast forward, I don't know, 7 years or so, we're on tour. At this point, we had played or shared venues with countless bands who are still at it today. Some of those bands were just starting as we were, finishing our run in the early 2000s. This part of the story, I have to be very careful because I don't want to shame anyone or say anything bad about anyone. I'm gonna have to keep some of these names quiet because I don't want to cause anything. We were on tour opening up for a larger act. Super cool people. The lead singer of this group, he was kind enough to take us out on the road with him opening up. We went on tour with him. We played all these gigs, and at one point we stopped to play somewhere. I think we played at Irving Plaza in New York City. And then after that gig, we went to Brooklyn to work on some pre-production for our album at the time that was coming. We finished doing some pre-production there, and we get back on the road, and we play what I felt is still to this day the best concert I've ever played in my life. I felt like everyone in the band as a whole unit, we all played so well together. And it was at the 930 Club in Washington, D.C. Our next show on this tour was going to be at the House of Blues in New Orleans. This was pre-Katrina and all that. So New Orleans was still like this crazy city, and the House of Blues was like a legendary spot I always wanted to play, and I was so excited about us going to play that show. But unfortunately, we got a phone call as we were moving to the next city. We're preparing. The headlining band on this tour, the lead singer, he pulled me to the side and he said, "Listen, man, whatever you do, keep doing what you're doing. It's been a pleasure playing these shows with you. I really like you." Like, he said some really awesome things to me, and he recently suffered a stroke, so it's really heavy. Like, when I heard about that, I don't know how to really get in touch with him anymore. I would have to reach out to some people I don't know if I want to reach out to right now to get in contact with him. I was kind of like wondering why he was telling me this stuff, because he obviously knew before I knew that they were going to pull us off the tour. So we get this phone call from management, and they said such and such label has informed us that they don't hear any potential hits on this album that you're working on. So we want you guys to go back to Brooklyn and finish working on this pre-production. My heart sank when I got that news, and you better believe I had a fit. I was not happy. A little bit of a a confession I have to make right now is I wasn't the easiest person to deal with when I was in my mid-20s. I was a loose cannon, as they put it. These were their words. They would call me a loose cannon. I was a lot to deal with. After I finished, I was all business about playing the gig, but once the gig was done, I slipped up a couple times, but 99% of the time, or let's just say 98% of the time, after I was done playing my show or my gig or wherever we were playing, it was time to let loose. And I would let loose. I would end up disappearing. I don't know how I would end up in some of these places. I'd wake up the next day, just crazy stuff would happen. And they were very, very patient with me. I have to say this about the guys I played in this band with. They were super patient with me, and I'm so grateful to them. I didn't show them all the appreciation that I have for them now, and I am sorry for that, but that's just I have to tell that because this is part of the story. This has an important part of the story. So we go back to Brooklyn. We're in a studio in Brooklyn, and we're in the middle of working on these songs, and we're playing, and then all of a sudden we just hear music that is much heavier and much louder than we are. And this music, I started to notice or recognize some of it. I was like, that sounds familiar. And the producer who was working with us at the time, that we were in the year 2000 at the time, but he had a lot of success in the 90s. He had worked with tons of bands who were all over the, top 40 bands. And he just closed his eyes for a moment and sat patiently. He did not complain. He didn't say anything bad. He just said, guys, cut it, stop. And so we stop, and Biohazard is playing. They're just going through a song, and we're sitting there listening. I'm nodding my head, and I'm like, wow, we're right next door to Biohazard. And this producer's like, just be quiet. So they finished playing. He said, let's take a break because they're going to be at it for a while. So they keep playing. We take a break. We go eat. We come back, and it's silent. We think that maybe Biohazard's gone. So we start to play again. They start up again. We stop. They stop. We start to play. They start to play. And then I hear Evan or either Evan or one of the other guys go, "Rah!" Like just scream. It was hilarious. It was funny to me. So after a while, it was obvious that this was going to continue. And this producer was just like holding his breath and woo-saw and all that kind of stuff. He finally gave up. He said, you know what, guys, it's not going to happen. We're not going to get through this pre-production. Sorry, but we're going to have to call it. And I'm like, well, not until I get to go meet Biohazard. Are you kidding me? So I start to make my way to the studio door to go next door and talk to Biohazard. And the band and this producer, they're all like, no. Everyone's getting all upset. Everyone in the studio, like, don't go over there. Stay away from these guys. Leave them alone. And I'm like, all right. So I said, look, I'm not going to start anything. I'm not going to cause a fight. I admire Biohazard. I'm a fan. I want to go over there and meet them. And he's like, no, that's not a good idea. Leave them alone. And I said, this is absolute nonsense. I'm going over there. And he said, no, you're not. You are to leave them alone. Stay away from them. And I was just like, wow. But just the look in his eyes of honestly, I mean, he looked terrified because it got to the point where I was like, you guys need to get out of my way. I'm going over there to talk to them because I want to meet them. I want to hang out with them. And oddly enough, actually a year later, I ended up meeting one of the main guys in the rap group Onyx. And he was as cool as could be, man, because not all those rap guys were nice to me when we were out there playing, and they looked at me and they're like, oh, you're a sellout and all that kind of stuff. I had to deal with a lot of grief because I've always been kind of misunderstood when it comes to that anyway. But for me, the reason I never really got into rap was because I always enjoyed listening to music where the artists were playing instruments. This is not any disrespect. I think that as an art form, rap, or even if you want to call it music, that's fine. I'm not here to debate that or ruffle any feathers there. But for me, the music I'm listening to, I would prefer that they be creating this music and not sampling it, if that makes any sense. Because I love Skinny Puppy. I love early day Ministry. I love electronic music. I don't like techno, but I like when people make music electronically. I'm a huge fan of groups like Yaz or Yazoo. I mean, I love that stuff. Depeche Mode, I love it, believe me. So I'm not talking against that, and there are some great hip hop groups, especially that mid 90s era. Oh my God, like Mobb Deep and DOS Effects and all that stuff. I mean, that stuff is great, but I never took a deep dive into it. You know, I just never got there because I had gone the other way, and it was just, there's so much music out there, and there were so many other songs and melodies that I was more interested in that I never went that direction. But they have my respect. You guys have my respect. Anyway, I don't really care for any of the stuff that's going on now, though. That's not my stuff. Anyway, if anyone from Biohazard happens to see this video, I want you guys to know that the band that was playing next door to you in probably late March of the year 2000, one of us was very interested in meeting you guys. I had no intentions of causing any trouble, but yet, these guys were afraid like there was going to be a brawl. And I don't know, you guys, you tell me, I mean, our band or these guys, who do you think is going to win in a fight? I mean, they've got one less guy and they still look hard. And I just admired what that band did. I feel like they are an important band in that whole rap metal, nu metal history, because I think that you get nu metal and all that from Biohazard. You can't have Limp Bizkit without Biohazard. You can't have Limp Bizkit without Rage Against the Machine, who technically came after them anyway. So these bands are, the whole thing with Anthrax and Public Enemy doing Bring the Noise, this Biohazard thing, Mordred, those are the true, yes, the Run DMC Aerosmith thing were the seeds. The roots were those guys. There are a lot of other bands too, like Shooty's Groove. There are a ton of bands that would dabble in that a little bit. Anyway, I just wanted to tell this story from the road. Hopefully you found it entertaining. If you did, you know what to do. Also, if you guys have any stories about any of those bands, or did you like that whole marriage with rap and metal? Because there were some people, as I was coming up and playing, there were some producers I talked to before it blew up that said that vocal and that art form will never work together. They were wrong. Who do you think was the best out of that era? Who do you think truly started it all? I want to know. Let's have a discussion about it. I'll have another video out to you soon.